Oh, thanks, Tina.
Okay, go ahead, Rowena.
Okay, so welcome back, Council. We are reconvening the standing committee meeting. And where we're at in the process is we have Councillor Carr up next on the queue for discussion to the item one, the code of conduct for council members and advisory board members. So Councillor Carr, I'll advance you and you have 5 minutes. Please go ahead.
Great. Thank you so much. And just to clarify, I did already say this, I believe, in one of my earlier comments, but I had forwarded several amendments, but I decided to withdraw them. One, because there was an amendment that I felt I could very much support that did the same thing as what I had intended through Councillor Dominato, which passed. And the second one, I received an explanation of from staff on the process if there was going to be a potential for a councillor being disqualified from holding office. That would be under the Vancouver Charter. Staff did explain that what that process would be. I feel satisfied by that. So I'll just move to final comments now. Really, we started this process recognizing that our code of conduct did really need improvement. Our acting city manager, Paul Mokry, called it unworkable. In my experience, I think that's a reasonable description. No process to informally resolve disputes, no clarity on who and how the final decisions are made, no guarantee of natural justice and fair process for the person being accused, including no established process for the public release of reports, and no provision for reimbursing legal expenses for council members or guaranteed provisions. So all of these were real gaps. These issues, every one of them has been addressed, and I really want to thank our staff in the legal department for their hard work on this and the intelligent approach that they've brought to this. So, and the way they've explained it. Thank you, thank you. I really like the fact that this code separates out the current code, which will remain as the code for staff, from this code for council and appointed members of advisory committees. That makes sense to me. I really, really like the integrity commissioner and the role to educate, to advise, to avoid disputes through informally resolving them, and to investigate. I also like the focus on procedural fairness and natural justice, which to me are fundamental in any dispute resolution processes or code of conduct complaints. So that to me is a fundamental that is needed and it's here, including the rules about the public release of documents. So the complainant to the complainant, so media do not get the reports first. So with all of those points in mind, as I say, I'm very happy to support all that, all of the recommendations in this report.
Thank you, Councillor Carr. Next, we have Councillor Hardwick for 5 minutes for final comments.
Well, thank you. Chair, I'm just wondering, I have a question. Can I factor a question in somehow at this point?
You can ask a point of information.
I have a point of information about what happens in the intervening period between the existing code of conduct and this new bylaw being implemented. Very specifically, we know it's going to take some time. Maybe it's a month, maybe it's a quarter until we get the integrity commissioner in place. And yet, are we going to be adopting the new bylaws in the intervening period? So, for example, if there was a code of conduct complaint against a councillor now, we would consider, after we've approved this, it would anticipate an integrity commissioner, and since they're not in place, would it then go to the mayor? And then if it went to the mayor, would the previous provisions of being able to determine who the investigator was, for example, which are changed in the new bylaw, would those still be implemented? So I'm just a little concerned about the crossover as we move from one to the other.
Okay, that is very clear. Thank you, Councillor Hardwick. I'll just ask staff to come off of mute and answer question around transition over to this new policy.
Certainly, Jason Twa here. So the way it's structured would be that there would be a requirement to have an ad hoc integrity commissioner appointed to just deal with the complaint that was brought forward. So, and under the process, if it's a complaint against a member by another member, that would be the mayor appointing a integrity commissioner for the purposes of conducting an investigation on that single matter. If it's a complaint by the public or a staff member against a council member or an advisory board member, then it would be the city manager appointing a person to investigate that.
Just building on that, right now, if a complaint comes in and the mayor chooses an investigator or proposes as an investigator, both the complainant and the complainee have opportunity to agree or not agree to the identity and appointment of that investigator. How would that be impacted?
So that would no longer be the case under the bylaw. We found that was unworkable under the current code in terms of attempting to get mutual agreement between the parties. So the bylaw envisions a process whereby, depending on the circumstance, the mayor or the city manager would simply appoint the investigator.
Understood. So that brings me back to the point about the intervening period before the integrity commissioner is appointed. Would it be the mayor or an interim integrity commissioner that would make that determination?
It would be the mayor that would make the determination as to the individual who would conduct the investigation. It would be an ad hoc appointment for that investigation.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Hardwick, you have 90 seconds to finish your remarks.
Oh, thank you. I'm happy to see this happening. I think that the existing document has been fraught with problems, and so we're moving in the right direction. I expect there's still be some growing pains, but in principle, I am supportive. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And next up, we have Councillor Dominato. You have 5 minutes. Please go ahead.
Thanks, Madam Chair. I'm going to start with a point of information through you to staff. It's just to clarify, if the report passes, then the staff will be bringing forward bylaw for enactment at a future meeting. What are the steps for council to take in conjunction with staff to move through the formal process of appointing integrity commissioner for 2 years? What does that look like in terms of steps and timelines?
So the recommendation in the council report is that council would direct the city manager to conduct a selection process once the bylaw is enacted, and that then a recommended candidate for integrity commissioner would be put forward for council's consideration. In terms of timing, clearly there's going to be a process that's going to have to go underway to locate an integrity commissioner and then have that put before council. So I suspect that would be, a potentially, at least a month process, if not slightly longer than that.
Okay, so yeah, I would think probably several months in terms of timing between the bylaws coming forward for enactment and then the process if the city manager's office is taking on the recruitment process. So probably more likely March, April.
Yeah, that's probably a fair estimate.
And so in the intervening time, then it would be, as you said earlier, is that leveraging the ad hoc provision within the new bylaws.
That's correct, yes.
Okay, I think that answers my questions. I don't know if there's still further amendments, so maybe I'll hold my comments until we see. Thanks.
I don't think there are, but you can hold your comments. It's your right to do so.
Thank you.
Point of privilege. Oh, oh, there, I'm on the list.
Point of privilege, Councillor Genova?
Oh, you said there weren't further comments and I was on the list. Just wanted to make sure we weren't calling a vote on anything. Thank you.
No, we were talking about amendments, but I'll advance Mayor Stewart and we will continue on. Go ahead, Mayor.
Thanks so much. Thank you to staff for doing all this work. A sizable part of my election campaign in 2018 was to increase council ethics, and little did I know how messy the code of conduct was until I actually had to administer it. It has been, I think, a total nightmare, which has been, I think, the result of the old code has hurt reputations of people, councillors unnecessarily because of the uncertainty of the process. It hasn't really, I don't think, been a just process no matter how hard we tried. That's not a comment on the lawyers that were hired to conduct these processes, but from reports getting lost in the mail to all kinds of stuff, it's been terrible. And then, of course, as an elected person yourself overseeing this, it's hard to explain to reporters how the whole thing works. So I do think this is a huge step forward. I do like that too, that staff, the code of conduct for staff will be reviewed at a later time. So I kind of see this as part A of the exercise. We'll have part B coming forward. And then council, I did also promise a lobbyist registry. So that is going to be coming. We had one crack at that, had some good feedback from staff. We'll be coming back with another proposal to council, but I'm fully supportive of this. What I really like is the annual review too, with a very knowledgeable person, because provincial and federal laws change too, and then it would be good for us to be able to have more of a living document than a bad one that seems stuck in time. So very supportive. Thank you to staff for all the hard work here. And just so council knows that if we get stuck in the ad hoc situation, I would be, drawing from the pool of lawyers that are already familiar with this process, that have been okayed on previous occasions. So that's with the advice of staff, of course. But that, if just to reassure you that I want this to transition to the new process as quickly as possible, so I can get out of the middle of it, because it hasn't been good, and I think not a good process at all. And thanks to staff. So I'll be, of course, supporting this. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mayor. On to Councillor Kirby-Young for 5 minutes, up to 5 minutes.
Yeah, thank you. I think this is a really important piece of work, and I appreciate the effort that staff have put into this, including the review of other jurisdictions. I think that there has been a consistent and a shared commitment to increase transparency and accountability by this council. And that's something that I think we heard loud and clear coming into this term, that there was a huge opportunity and a need, framing it positively, to rebuild trust in their civic government. And we have taken a number of steps to do that, as was referenced with the Auditor General, lobbyist registry, and passing of other motions. I do want to acknowledge and thank Councillor DeGenova for bringing this forward, because it stemmed from a motion, I think it was referenced in the report, that she had brought forward in 2019, I believe in October. And I think it's important work to signal that. I think it's important to have an arm's length third party investigating things of this nature in the political construct in which we operate. It is a definite improvement over what we have now. And it does provide additional transparency for the public, which is really what this should be about. And it's who we serve, because they will now see the published results of reports, whether or not there's found to be issues of concern, and where lines were crossed, or whether or not investigations were found to be unfounded. And it's equally important that both are communicated. So I'm happy to see the recommendation for a third-party integrity commissioner. I'm happy to see it taken out of the political office of the mayor. I think for everybody's benefit to have that third-party extension. And I think also that the need to shore this up also speaks to the fact that there is additional capability built in here for the integrity commissioner to attempt to identify if any complaints that are brought forward are in fact frivolous, and or resolve things informally before they proceed to a formal investigation. And I think that's really important, because if there's an actual serious breach, it should absolutely be investigated. However, sometimes it may not be a breach. It may be a frivolous complaint, and it costs the taxpayer money to investigate those. So I think this strikes a really good balance there, and I'm looking forward to putting this in place and having it come forward. And I appreciate the work that was done on it. And I'm happy to vote in support. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Kirby-Young. Next up, we have Councillor DeGenova for up to 5 minutes. Please go ahead.
Thanks so much. And I've just actually sent in an amendment just after hearing some of the comments, including the mayor's comments. And I really do appreciate the extra time and effort that it has taken for the mayor to oversee this process on top of the other daily responsibilities that the mayor's office has and that our mayor has. That being said, in looking at this policy, considering the previous policy or the policy that we currently have has existed over many terms, we're not just looking at this for ourselves. We're looking at it for councils of the future, and just in trying to really consider the integrity commissioner, the absence of an integrity commissioner, the fact that decisions need to be made, and it's not a process we want to hurry through. We want to make sure that we're listening to our staff, that we're making sure that we're doing this in the spirit of how this report and the recommendations have come to us and the reasons as to why we need this to evolve. That being said, the amendment that I put forward is that council delegate the appointment of the ad hoc commissioner to the city manager in all cases in the absence of an appointment of an integrity commissioner. And I don't know if the mayor meant it literally when he said, it's been a tough work. I think he's done an excellent job, but I also think that, the role of the mayor and the role of all council members, and it does include council members, is political. This also would apply, as it states on page 4 of the report, to staff, but this is also members of the public who file complaints. Right now, we have to agree on an investigator as council members. But that being said, again, not just looking at this for this council, as the council in the future. And on page 4 of the report, this individual will just choose the investigator. And I think I've stated the reasons, but happy through points of information through the chair to answer any questions that there may be on this amendment, but just wanted to share the spirit in which I was putting this forward. Thank you.
Councillor DeGenova, I do appreciate that. I'm going to stop your timer just to clarify the wording of the amendment. In that it reads that council delegate the appointment of the ad hoc commissioner. Do you mean the authority instead of appointment? But that just want to make sure the clerk has flagged that perhaps that word is meant to read authority.
Through you, if that would be best, I'm happy to send in an amendment to the amendment if I need to.
Okay, that's not necessary. We can change that for you. So I'll just ask the clerk to make that quick adjustment, and we can move over to an amendment.
It's just I had understood from law that I'm not sure if I could ask a point of information through you to law and staff.
Absolutely.
Appointment or authority would be the correct word.
Sure, please go ahead. That's over to staff. We've got the question. Is it best to read authority or appointment?
Jason, do you have a recommendation on that?
Yeah, I would think that we would probably want to say appointment, or yes, the appointment of an ad hoc integrity commissioner as opposed to authority.
Okay, great. So as it's been written by Councillor DeGenova, it stands. Thank you very much for the clarification. So we're in an amendment queue. Is there any discussion on the amendment? Mayor Stewart, please go ahead.
I think that because the staff component has been taken out of this and it's going to be in they're completely separated, then this would be fine. I think if that wasn't the case, this might present difficulty. But I'm okay with this, and again, it'd probably be the same pool of people that are chosen. So if I'm fine with this amendment if council wants to go ahead.
Okay, thanks very much. And over to Councillor Carr.
Yeah, thank you. Through you, if I could ask a point of information to staff. I'm just wondering if our legal staff could comment on whether or not this is okay from their point of view.
Sure. Let's have, if we can hear from legal.
I think that the general direction's okay. I think that there may be some changes that we need to make to that section of the bylaw to more fully deal with that, because there are specific circumstances, for example, in section 5.6, that set out the circumstances in which an ad hoc integrity commissioner would be appointed. So the general direction, yes, but we may it may be useful for us to be able to draft that understanding into the bylaw.
And another point of information, does that require any amendment to this amendment?
The amendment is fine, but we would need to, like I say, we would need to address that expressly in the bylaw.
So you can do that without any change to this. Is that correct?
Yes, this
Okay.
general direction allows us to do that.
All I needed to hear was that legally this is fine. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much, Councillor. Councillor Boyle.
Thanks. I also appreciate hearing that legally it's fine. It's not, it wasn't a gap to me in the work that staff did. So it's still not entirely clear to me that it's needed. And to just be upfront, we've been looking at this report for most of today. And so having not just seeing this very last minute and having not really been able to process it and not understanding the gap it's filling, that didn't stand out as a gap to me in the long time we've had to process this. I won't be supporting it. I just don't see that it's needed at this point.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Boyle. We are now going to go to a vote. There's nobody else on the queue, so please go ahead and vote on screen. And so let me just see here. That motion passes with Councillor Swanson, Councillor Hardwick, and Councillor Boyle in opposition. Okay, so we are back on the main queue, and I'll just actually take a moment. I think by the time we get through our final speakers here, and then we have to reconvene in council before 5 o'clock, unless council is agreeable to go to 5:15. We can start the meeting at after 6 o'clock at 6:15 in order to deal with one of the two motions that we have on deck after this item. So I just wanted to flag that as a, yes, please go ahead.
I just wanted to note that I will have to pick my child up at childcare and will not be able to stay past 5 p.m.
Past 5 o'clock. Okay. Let's go on to Councillor DiGenova. Do you have any final comments to this item?
I just really want to thank staff. I want to take a moment to thank all of our staff, to thank Mr. Mokri, the entire legal team, Jason Twa, everyone who's been involved in looking at the code of conduct. It's something that I know that although we may never find a perfect way forward, because there will always be a situation that perhaps doesn't specifically fit the model, I think that this is the very, very, very best, and certainly an improvement over the current process that I've found quite troubling myself. And I do think that we have to find a balance of having respectful discourse, but at the same time, make sure that people feel that they can, if need be, file a complaint. As we move into February, which we have, anti-bullying events and anti-bullying week. I think that it's really important with Pink Shirt Day and all of the other, there's other things that the Code of Conduct addresses. I just think that it's a good reminder, and also something that this council can feel that they contributed to, that we all contributed to, and hopefully we can find ways to work through this in a way that we leave a legacy of an integrity commissioner here at the City of Vancouver that will serve other councils, because that is how I see it. And I meant it when I thanked the mayor. I think he's done a very good job, a tough job in having to oversee the process in the way he has and still be involved in the process. I still do feel that it's very important, though, that we do have an update to the process. And there are times that I've wished that the process was updated, that I have had to myself, consider entering into the process. And I have to say, the process that we currently have falls short considering the needs of council and the complaints that I have sort of overall knowledge through that the rest of council does as well. Knowing that it's a confidential process, I'm being very careful in what I say as well. So I just wanted to really thank staff for this. I know it's been a lot of work. I know you've been really thoughtful in your approach, and I know that these have been hard conversations to have. So that's all. I will be supporting this. I may ask for severing. I'm just going to look at the final document here. Thanks.
Okay, thanks very much. Councillor Dominato.
Thanks, Chair. My closing comments will simply reflect is that I appreciate that council is having this discourse, particularly because sometimes our policies don't keep up with the times, and to the mayor's point earlier, the fact there will be a regular review, I think, is really critical. But I do want to start by thanking staff for the work that was put into this. There was an enormous amount of research, I think, that went into it. I know they leveraged some of the resources from UBCM, but I know they looked at other jurisdictions, and also appreciative of Councillor DiGenova identifying this as something that needed to be reviewed. And I actually think it shows a coming together of council that we've been taking this work, and then ultimately we have a better code of conduct in place, both for this council but going forward. And I think that I don't envy the mayor. I think he inherited a very challenging policy that having these complaints having to be routed through his office. And so I think that what we've landed on is a much better code of conduct and complaint process, including the addition of an integrity commissioner, which I think will help bolster confidence, restore trust, and aligns very much with some of the other initiatives underway in terms of an independent auditor general from Councillor Hardwick, as well as looking at having a lobbyist from the mayor's motion, and all of these pieces will strengthen our democratic system, and I think that's really important for building trust with the public. And so I just want to reflect that, and also that not only we improve the process, but it's more transparent on a number of levels. And I think that's also critical to building trust and confidence in our system. So appreciative of the work and also all of the discourse that's taken place today around the table, or virtual table here. So thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Councillor Dominato. And then we have here Councillor Hardwick, up to 5 minutes.
Thank you very much. So the code of conduct has been a very problematic document. I personally have dealt with it, as council knows, and I've seen it weaponized and used in very unconstructive and actually destructive ways. So I see this whole exercise as personally a great relief, that there will be greater integrity in the process, and that should give heart and the opportunity for more trust. Is it a perfect solution? No, it's not. There remain many concerns that I have about the manner in which we're dealing with code of conduct broadly within the city. There are conflict of interest aspects of it. Then other complexities that we're seeing, where I guess we're dealing with new things that changes in society, for example, that were certainly not contemplated in earlier documents. So,
Councilor Hardwick, I didn't indicate that you only had about a minute and a half left because your points of information at the beginning of this new session. So I just
okay.
asked you to wrap up your comments.
I'm sorry, you said five. I thought you said 5 minutes. I'm happy to wind up my comments and say I'm grateful that this is moving forward, and I see it as a very positive move. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Councilor Hardwick. And Councilor Boyle, after the 5 minutes.
Thanks. Also grateful for the significant amount of work and thought that went into this, and particularly want to lift up the importance of the informal options, particularly for committees, and the alternative dispute resolution processes and the space created for less formal ways to wrestle through or respond to conflict, both for council, but also for those advisory committees where we have some very dedicated residents committing time. I think those changes have been put forward very thoughtfully. I think they'll make a significant difference in those spaces, and I'm grateful for the work that went into this.
Thank you very much, Councillor Boyle. And Councillor Swanson, please go ahead.
Yeah, I'm glad
Swanson,
that
to be clear, you have 2 minutes.
I'm glad that this is being approved. I'm a little bit concerned, actually. While I agree with that we should be respectful, I'm concerned that if I say that Landlord BC, for example, is a lobby group, are some people going to say that that is not respectful? Or if I say that an investor who buys up apartment buildings and gets rid of tenants and raises the rent is a gentrifier, am I going to be accused of being disrespectful? So I think the question is not about being respectful, but about what is the definition of respectful. And I don't think we should let it be pushed over into statements that are political and made in good faith. But I'm glad that we're passing this. I think we desperately need it. And yeah, let's go. Let's do it.
Thank you very much, Councillor Swanson. So with that, and no one else on the queue, we are going to move to a vote. And I did hear that potential severing would be requested, so I just wanted to flag that to Councillor Picanova. Not hearing.
I was looking through, and I'm not seeing the specific portion right now.
So no need to sever.
No.
I'd like to move to sever. I don't know if we can. I think it's 2F. The component on the screen is listed as 2F from what we're seeing right now.
That's what I was looking for. Thanks.
Okay, so you're interested in.
It says A2F, I believe, but it's difficult to follow because we just have the excerpts from the fulsome code of conduct. So that's the number I'm seeing on the screen.
Okay, so I'll just defer to the clerk quickly. Is it best so we can vote on the whole section and take out 2F and we can vote on that separately? If you can clarify, please.
It is the clerk here, Chair Bly, and yes, if that is council's will, that works.
Okay, so we're going to go ahead and vote on the on 2F, and then we'll vote on the balance of the recommendations. So I will ask clerks to go to vote.
And point of privilege, just for clarity, could you read out what we're voting on specifically?
We are
just to make sure
voting on the entire.
No, I understand. Could you read out 2F, just at least the first line, to make sure that we are voting on the correct piece, because I'm having the same issues as Councillor Kirby-Young. It would have been helpful to maybe in future, I'll ask a point of privilege to have it emailed out, but I don't need that for one piece.
Okay, so 2F is responsibility. A member must respect and comply with the acts of the Parliament of Canada, the Legislature of British Columbia, including the Vancouver Charter, city bylaws, and applicable city policies, and avoid conduct that reasonably undermines or has the potential to undermine public confidence in city governance except members who participate in peaceful civil disobedience. And just to flag these, the entirety of the recommendations were emailed during the in-camera session. So
Thanks.
we're in the middle of a vote, so we'll have to just ask everybody to continue to vote on screen. And clerks, I am in favor. And so that motion passes with Councilor DeGenova and Councilor Kirby-Young in opposition. And then we will go to vote on the balance of the recommendations. And that passes unanimously with nobody in opposition. Thank you, Council. That completes item 1. And unfortunately means we are not going to get to the 2 motions today that were on the agenda. And these motions will be deferred to the next committee meeting, which I believe is February 10th. So at this stage, we can adjourn the committee meeting for today and go into regular council, and I will pass the chair over to the mayor.
Oh yeah, I forgot about that part. Are we just recessing though? I think.
Just a pause. We're actually going to complete the business of this. I need a motion to refer the 2 motions to the committee meeting on February 10th. So
Okay.
if somebody doesn't mind doing that.
Sure, I'll move that.
Thank you, Mayor. And all those in favor?
Aye.
And any opposed? Okay, that's great. And so we are now adjourned in committee meeting and over to council and the mayor. Go ahead.
Okay, so I'm just looking, sorry, I'm just looking for this other script. It's, just give me 1 second, council, and I know we're at 5 to 5, so there we go. I think I got it now. Okay, we're going to reconvene in council to deal with the recommendations and actions from today's standing committee on city finance and services meeting. Can we have the roll call, please, clerk?
Yes, Mayor Stewart in the chair. Councillor Carr.
Here.
Councillor DeGenova.
Present.
Councillor Fry.
Here.
Councillor Swanson.
Here.
Councillor Hardwick.
Present.
Councillor Weeb is on leave of
Present.
absence. Oh,
I'm back.
okay. Councillor Boyle.
Present.
Councillor Dominato.
Present.
Councillor Bly is
Present.
in the chair. Councillor Kirby-Young.
Present.
Sorry, Mayor Stewart, yes, the meeting has quorum.
Great, thanks very much. And if the clerk's can help me here, we need a motion to adopt the standing committee's recommendations. And I think it's just for items 1, isn't it?
So moved. Councillor DeGenova?
Yes,
Second, Councilor Dominato.
Sure, I just want to double check that is it just item 1 we're moving on?
that is correct, Mayor Stewart.
Okay, thanks. So that's been moved and seconded. All those in favor, yay.
Yay.
Opposed,
Yay.
nay. Okay, thanks. That's carried unanimously. And now we need a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Motion.
Oh, thanks very
Second.
much,
Second.
Councillor Harwood. I heard Councillor DeGenova seconded. So all in favor, yay.
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 Point of information,
Yeah.
or I guess is it? point of
Sorry, go
order?
ahead. We're kind of in the middle of a vote, but
Yeah, I thought we were doing new business and.
oh no, this is the meeting that follows the standing committee meeting at 6 o'clock. We'll be going in to do all that work.
Gotcha. Okay.
Okay. I didn't hear any nays. I'll call again though. Any nays? And that passes. Thanks so much.
Mayor, I have a point of parliamentary procedure. I think we also have to adopt items 2 and 3 that were passed on consent.
Clerks.
Mayor Stewart, the clerk is here. Just yes, we did do a referral motion for those two items. So that point of parliamentary procedure is well taken.
Move adoption?
Wait. So we just have recessed. So if you just give me so what we did pass was adopting item 1, and then we adjourned. So I'll come right back to you, Council. Okay, Council, I think we're okay that we, the intent was to move the items that were passed both through debate and on consent, as well as the referral. So we're good. And so enjoy your dinner, and we'll see you back in Council at 6. Thank you.
Welcome to TELUS Conferencing. To join the conference, enter your access code followed by the number sign.
Hi, Tina, can you hear me?
Can you hear me?
Yes. Do you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay, Echo Echo Charlie.
Thank you.
Thank you too. Bye-bye.
clerk, so I'll just move right to roll call.
Mayor Stewart is in the chair. Councillor Carr.
Here.
Councillor DeGenova. Councillor Fry.
Here.
Councillor Swanson.
Here.
Councillor Hardwick.
Present.
Councillor Wiebe.
Present.
Councillor Boyle.
Present.
Councillor Dominato.
Present.
Councillor Bly.
Present.
Councillor Kirby-Young. You have quorum, Mayor Stewart.
Thanks very much. I'm just going to go through the plan for the day, but just to remind the public that it's worth following us on Twitter or on the city's website or YouTube link. And that's where all the proceedings are. And any comments can be sent to council using the web form, and that's also the address is also on Twitter. This evening we have the remaining agenda, the following remaining agenda items: 1 report, 2 referral reports, 23 bylaws, 1 administrative motion, 3 members' motions, notice of council members' motions, new business inquiries, and other matters. So we do have just 4 hours this evening to try to get through these, and then perhaps the clerk, if we don't get through, we can look for another day. But I imagine it is probably the next council day. But I'll get back to you with a date if we don't get through. We'll now consider reports remaining from yesterday. We have report 3 that has speakers, so we will hear that. And referral reports 6 and 7 were held by Councillor Hardwick. So we'll move to number 3, which is 7520 Balaclava Street. It's a proposed agricultural land reserve subdivision. And I just want to inform council, we'll hear this a bit from staff, but I did want to inform you that this is a new process for council, a provincial change that's required by the Agricultural Land Commission Act. So it's an applicant process. So the applicant is entitled to speak to the application and is here or was on the list, maybe here this evening. The Agricultural Land Commission cannot proceed with the proposed subdivision if council does not support and forward the application. So what used to be a 1-step process where a proponent would just go to the Agricultural Land Commission now is a 2-step process where it has to go through the local government and the Agricultural Land Commission. So we have Nick Danford, the rezoning planner, here to provide a short presentation for report 3, which we'll see since this is a new process, and we have a speaker on the list to speak. So perhaps we can go to Nick Danford.
Thanks, Mayor Stewart. I'm just confirming you can see my presentation and hear me.
I can hear you. If you could maybe move the microphone slightly closer to yourself, that would be good.
Sure. Is that better?
A little bit better.
Okay.
And we do see your presentation on the public screen.
Okay, great. I'll project a bit more. So
okay.
Thanks, Mayor Stewart. As mentioned, my name is Nick Danford, and I'm one of the planners here at the city. So the file in front of council today is for a proposed subdivision in the city's agricultural land reserve down in Southlands. Since this is something new, as Mayor Stewart had mentioned, we at the city don't really deal with this all that often, and so I'm hoping council will bear with me while I go through the proposal itself, as well as the regulatory process involved with reviewing such an application. I also just wanted to note that yesterday we did receive a few questions from council, and I will respond to those at the end of my presentation. So this past fall, city staff received notification from the ALC, or the Agricultural Land Commission, that an application for an 18-lot subdivision had been filed at 7520 Balaclava Street in the city's ALR. The ALR consists of land throughout the province designated by the Agricultural Land Commission to be retained as viable agricultural land. The ALC regulates and is the approving authority for any subdivision taking place within these lands. So just quickly, in this instance for the proposal, subdivision is when a piece of property is divided into smaller parcels. So that's what you'll see in front of you today. So now, once an application for subdivision is received through the ALC's portal, the application is forwarded to the local government for consideration and input. So by resolution of council, the city has the discretion to either forward or not forward the application for subdivision to the ALC as per the ALC Act. So if council exercises its authority to not forward the application, it will proceed no further. If the city does forward the application, whether in support or not, the ALC will make a decision on the subdivision taking into account local government comments. So the proposal for subdivision that was received by staff is to create 18 detached residential lots ranging from 720 to 992 square meters in size. The proposal also includes a land dedication of approximately 1 hectare. Included in the 1 hectare is a 4-meter wide river walk along the Fraser River frontage of the property, a new public green space at the end of Balaclava Street that is directly adjacent an historic shipyard workshop, which is included in the dedication. A new public road would split through the subdivision, connecting Blenheim to Balaclava Street, as well as there's environmentally sensitive lands to the west of the property that would also be dedicated. So council, I'm sure that you have an idea of approximately where we're talking about. The 8-acre former industrial shipyard is located in the far south end of Balaclava Street along the Fraser River in the city's Southlands neighborhood. The neighborhood is a unique and semi-rural area of town with larger residential and agricultural properties, some housing equestrian farms as well as stables. So given the semi-rural nature of the neighborhood, RA1 or limited agricultural use zoning is really dominant in the area. The regulations in the RA1 zone allow for lots to be a minimum size of 9,100 square meters. Oh, sorry about that. So directly north of the site are city-owned lots on Celtic Avenue that contain a slough-type waterway, and because of this are generally not developable. To the west of the site is Deering Island development, which consists of 37 single detached residential homes subdivided in the early 90s. To the east are 12 single detached residential homes that were rezoned in 2005 in order to facilitate this development. And of course, to the south is Fraser River. So the site currently houses an eclectic mix of uses and structures. There are some unused horse yards, a marina, shipyard buildings that house local artists, as well as a warehouse containing a local business. Interestingly enough, the site has been identified as potentially containing archaeological significant resources, and it has been identified as historically relevant lands for the Musqueam First Nations, as well as an early settlement site for Japanese Canadians. So now I'd just like to get into a bit of the city's policy currently in place that regulates this piece of property. In addition to the ALR regulations, this property is designated agricultural in the city's Regional Context Statement Official Development Plan. So the ODP is a zoning tool that links municipal policies and plans to Metro Vancouver's regional growth strategy. The RGS sets an urban containment boundary and reinforces protection of agricultural, conservation, and rural lands. The proposal in front of you does not conform to the goals of the Regional Context Statement. The property outlined here in yellow also sits within the Southlands Plan that was approved in 1988 and sets a series of policies reinforcing the semi-rural nature of the area. So in the plan, this property itself is identified as Celtic Island area. And in 1986, Council adopted the objective to create significant public waterfront access through the island or through the site, protect the equestrian character of the area, and exploit opportunities to secure a unique park environment and preserve fish and wildlife habitat. Now, while the proposal does present many opportunities, there are a number of policy challenges and further considerations that are required, that require discussion and investigation with a variety of stakeholders before the subdivision can be considered. The largest of the proposed subdivided lots is 992 square meters. This is significantly less than the minimum lot size of 9,100 square meters required in the RA1 district schedule. And so because of this, in order to facilitate the proposed subdivision, a rezoning application would need to be approved by council. So in this case, there is no rezoning policy that would support considering this application. And at this time, there's no future policy initiatives for this area other than the citywide Vancouver plan. So in addition to these policy challenges, There's heritage, archaeological, environmental, and parkland considerations that require further conversation with key stakeholders as well as the city in advance of considering a rezoning application here. So council, for these reasons today, staff are recommending that council not forward the application to the ALC, thereby not advancing the application any further. And so as I mentioned at the beginning of my presentation, council did send through a few questions in advance of the meeting. And before I hand it back over to Mayor Stewart, I'd like to take the opportunity to just respond to those few questions. So the first one that we received was what, if any, consultation has taken place within the neighborhood with the Musqueam Nation, with the Japanese Canadian community about the site and subdivision proposal? So a synopsis for communication with these stakeholders to date was not submitted with the subdivision application, but I believe Michael Mortensen, who is representing the developer, is on the speakers list, and so he'd be best suited to speak and address that question. The second question is what archaeological investigations have taken place to date regarding possible omittance and other cultural or historical significance? And so the same answer here, we do not, information was not submitted with the subdivision application, and so I'm hoping that Michael Mortensen might be able to respond to that question as well. The third question is what direction to staff is necessary to have the shipyard workshop building added to the Heritage Registry? So adding this building to the registry would only recognize its heritage value, but would not offer any protection to the site. Additions to the register are usually done with approval and cooperation with the owner, and adding to the register would not create any commitment of further development of lands, but may create expectation on the applicant's behalf that the city is willing to accommodate future redevelopment and possible compensation for this retention. And the final question is, does the city have any title to the site in question? And the answer is no to that. And so with that, Mayor Stewart, I'll hand it back over to you. Thank you. And we're here to answer any questions you may have. Thanks.
Thanks so much. And as this procedure is fairly new, I'm going to ask clerks, do we go to the speaker now, or do we have a round of questions by council to staff like in a public hearing?
It would be similar to the public hearing process. So you would get, we answer questions of, council can ask questions of staff before we hear from the speakers.
And in this case, I believe the speaker is the proponent. Would we ask if the proponent wants to present first before, or so it in that way it would vary from a public hearing?
So it would be treated similar to any council agenda items, so not fall into the public hearing process.
Great. Okay, thanks so much. So at this point, council, then I'm going to turn to you. I do have a number of folks with questions.
I have a parliamentary procedure. Sorry, Mayor. It's Councilor.
Go ahead.
Just in that vein, is I seem to recall the city manager had circulated an actual like a sort of order of how this was to proceed. So are we following that? That was circulated.
Well, that's why I'm checking with the clerk, just to make sure that we're doing this right. Right. So that was circulated, and we are following it, but it's similar to a public hearing, but it is more like a regular council. It proceeds like more like a regular council report or motion. So we'll go to Councillor Carr for 5 minutes. Questions to staff.
Yes, thanks, Mr. Mayor. My first question is, have staff contacted the Musqueam Nation? And if so, what is their opinion of this project or proposal?
Great, thanks for the question, Councillor Carr. No, we haven't been in touch with the Musqueam First Nations. We are looking for the applicant to start those conversations.
Okay. Second question. What would be the process with Metro Vancouver and the regional contract statement should council decide that we do want to forward this application and or support this application, and is there any requirement for us to actually check first with Metro Vancouver, which actually has to approve of any withdrawals of land from the Agricultural Land Commission that is designated within the regional context statement.
Sorry, Councillor Carr. Yeah, so any changes to the regional growth strategy would need to be approved by Metro Vancouver.
Right. So can we make a decision without going through Metro Vancouver?
I believe we would need to consult them and engage them in the process. We wouldn't be able to hand over to just single-handedly change the designation.
Yeah, that's my understanding too. So this could not be forwarded with saying that there's our support. I mean, well, anyway, I'm just saying that if we don't get the support of Metro Vancouver, how could we possibly say that we support it? So isn't there a step there that we have to go through before we would indicate support?
Yeah, well, that's the thing. There are a lot of moving parts to it, and so we would want to engage with Metro Vancouver before moving forward with any changes to the designation.
Right.
Can I just stop your timer there, Councillor Carr? I think this is a really important point. So if staff could just, there are a whole bunch of steps that this would take for a plan, but this first step that we're going through today is only to allow permission for this to go to the ALR, the Agricultural Land Commission, and if they reject it, then it's dead. If we reject it, it's dead. If it goes to the ALR and they reject it, it's dead. If it goes to Metro, it's dead. If we don't rezone it, it's dead. There's so many, but I think there's sequential steps, if that helps. So this is the very first step that has to happen.
May I just interject there, Councillor Carr? We're trying to find a bit more specifics for you on this question.
Great. Okay, I appreciate that. If we could hear that before we come to a decision-making point, that would be great.
Sure.
My third question is surrounding a report that I received on the previous council that I was on, or we received, and that was regarding the most vulnerable areas to climate change, specifically rising sea levels. This area was one of the ones identified as one of the most vulnerable to sea level rise. And my memory of that staff report was amongst the different options staff wanted council to be starting to consider and think about is in fact abandonment or retreat, recognizing that it would be impossible to build a dike long enough along the lower Fraser to be able to protect this area. I wonder if you could provide council with some verification of that, some extra information around that. Why are we even considering development in a place that staff have identified as having potential to have abandonment or retreat?
Great, thanks, Councillor Carr. So yeah, this site is located in the Fraser River floodplain, and it's the largest and most at-risk floodplain in the city of Vancouver. So this creates the environmental complexities around it. So there are some minimum flood protection levels that would need to be met, as well as setbacks from the waterway.
Okay, I'll leave it there. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Bly, up to 5.
Thanks, Mayor. I will just jump in right there where Councillor Carr left off. I'm curious if the proposed plan allows for the setbacks you mentioned regarding the floodplain, and that there would be required setbacks. Does the plan allow for setbacks that would be adequate?
We don't have, thank you for the question, Councillor Bly. We don't have that information right now. We would be expecting that any application would meet those requirements and go higher. And so, but we don't have that information at this time with the application that was put forward.
Okay, and follow up to that in terms of process, that this report moving ahead in council would allow the ALC to come back and be able to provide more detail around some of the concerns that staff have raised. That's my understanding. Is that correct?
Yes, so the ALC would be able to, the ALC is the approving body of the subdivision, and so they can approve the subdivision on conditions, and so the condition of going through a rezoning process and exploring these would likely be their condition if providing council and local government comments on that.
Okay, thank you. Moving on to the comment that, and by the map, it looks like this is the absolute last portion of ag land in Vancouver. And the comment made was that we have a responsibility to protect viable land, agricultural land. Is this land actually viable? Meaning, can it be used as agricultural land?
Thanks for the question. My understanding is that the lands are being used more as have a more industrial nature. So actually, some contamination exploration would need to be done in advance of that.
Okay, great. Thank you. I note that in the plan there is a mention of the shipyard building, but there are existing buildings in and around that shipyard building. Is it the assumption that those buildings would come down and don't hold any heritage value?
So further investigation would need to take place. So far, the shipyard building has been identified as a historic building, a significantly historic building. However, staff would be wanting further information on the other buildings before proceeding.
Okay. You make a comment around the RA1 zone, the 9,100 square meters is the average lot size, and I'm just wondering, how does the proposed lot size in the plan compare to an average residential single-family lot size in any other RM zone?
These ones would be a bit larger than the standard residential lot.
Okay.
Oh, significantly larger.
Okay, so the ones proposed in the plan are significantly larger than what we may see elsewhere. In fact, but maybe a follow-up question to that. It's been compared to the development on Deering Island, and that sort of development, I've heard people say, I wasn't around at the time, of course, that it took some innovative planning direction to enable or to sort of realize Deering Island as a development in terms of it being subdivided. How do the lot sizes compare to Deering Island?
They're comparable.
Okay. Okay, moving on to the plan, the Southlands ODP established, I think, in 1988 or maybe 86. I can't remember what you said there. Is staff, I mean, that's a long time, but I understand that residents in Southlands are quite happy with that plan and are really in a position or hold a position that they want to protect that plan. Does staff concur that that plan ought to be protected as much as possible?
Thanks for the question. Yeah, so staff recognize that it is an old plan and it does need some updating. However, like I had mentioned in the presentation, there's no immediate policy initiative other than the citywide Vancouver plan.
Okay. As for the plan that's come forward, does staff feel that there would be required investments that the city would be responsible for to realize the sort of final product of the park that would be gifted to the city of Vancouver and or the shipyard's historic building? Or is this sort of being proposed as a sort of turnkey gift if the development was to be realized?
Yeah, thanks for the question. That would have to be explored through the process. We would have to have a better understanding of what is being provided and look at a negotiation and a pro forma with that.
Okay, I'd like to move for a second round of questions, if I may, Mayor.
Indeed. So we have a seconder for second round of questions.
Councilor Dominato.
Thanks. And we'll do yays and nays. All in favor, yay.
Yay. Yay.
Opposed, nay. Okay, Council, thanks. We'll go to Councillor Kirby-Young. Next, up to 5 minutes.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Mayor. I have a couple of questions. One is, I've read the report in great detail, and I'm pretty clear on the process. And there's a lot of stakeholders listed, the significance to the muskrat, the Japanese fishery, obviously the area residents and others. But I note there wasn't any specific reference to the other buildings that currently house working artists, and in some cases, I think the artists are both working as well as living there. And I'm just wondering if there's been any discussion on that between the proponent and city staff, and why they're not referenced in the report as one key stakeholder that would be impacted by this proposal.
Thanks for the question, Councillor Kirby-Young. This is a very early stages application, and so we would expect that those conversations would be forthcoming if this would proceed any further.
Okay, but our staff are aware that this is housing working artists currently that are on site?
Yes, yes, staff is aware that there's artist studios there.
Okay. I just wanted to be clear on that. The other question that I have is that it seems that the applicant has chosen to bring this forward looking, my take on it is to sort of get some certainty as to whether there's a possibility of moving forward. And staff references in the report that there isn't a governing policy to consider this under. I'm wondering if the applicant had sort of done further due diligence around potentially really looking at what was involved in the cost to retain the ship facility, which would potentially need a lot of work to maintain it. Had done some outreach with the Musqueam First Nation or conversations with some of the Japanese history neighbors, and had advanced and got more of a sense of how those stakeholders felt if staff would view this application any differently than the recommendation we have before us.
That's a great, the question about that consultation is a great question for Mr. Mortensen, for the applicant.
Well, my question was specifically a staff, because from what I understand, they haven't engaged. My question is specifically what staff perspective, in the sense that the applicant, to my knowledge, hasn't chosen to engage yet, and that would be looking to do that after. They're trying to get some of the regulatory hurdles out of the way first. Would you view the application any differently? It's my question to staff.
Thank you, Councillor. This is Teresa O'Donnell. Yes, we absolutely think those consultations are very important. As Nick said, this is a very premature application. He went through a number of studies and consultations that we would normally see in something like this. Not only the consultations with First Nations and other groups, but also an exploration of the archaeological resources, the historic resources, the floodplain and flood-prone areas are a large concern. Consultation with the park board about open space and what improvements might be necessary along that riverwalk. Those are all very important discussions and studies, and that we would need to see prior to advancing this in any term, if it were to come back for some kind of a zoning. But the first step is, of course, whether or not the council has an appetite to remove this from the agricultural land. So that's why we're here, and we don't have a lot of detail at this point.
Okay, that's helpful. I'm going to leave it there for now.
Thank you. Councillor Fry, up to 5.
Yeah, thanks. And I appreciate Ms. O'Donnell's context there, and especially reflecting sort of some of the larger planning that needs to go on in that area. And I would add, based on a video that was shared with us from one resident, that some further planning into the road network and shared access with horses and cars is probably something that also needs further exploration in a master planning sense. I'm curious about the context of the regional context statement, and if staff are concerned that this might be precedent setting. As I look at some of the other properties within the ALR and some of the subdivisions here in Vancouver, is there a concern that this would be a precedent setting consideration should council approve this request to go to the ALC?
Thanks for the question, Councillor Fry. I'm going to hand that over to Susan Haid to respond.
Oh, hi, this is Susan Haid, Deputy Director, Long Range Strategic Planning. Certainly, at any time that there is an exclusion to the ALR and an amendment to the regional growth strategy, there is the potential of it being precedent setting to other member municipalities. So yes, that risk is there. Vancouver is an anomaly in that we have a small ALR area in a very urbanized municipality. And it typically is, the agricultural uses are for large estate, more horse lands than productive agriculture. But yes, that amendment could be precedent setting, and certainly at the regional board, something that would raise a number of questions from other member municipalities.
I appreciate that nuanced response. On the further subject of long range and strategic planning, Councillor Carr earlier mentioned the sea level rise reports that talked about managed retreat of Southlands. In the event that we were for parts of Southlands, in the event of sea level rise and flooding and glacial melt that raised the Fraser and all those kind of components that we of course are dealing with climate change. Is there any, should this be approved to go forward to the ALC and then approved in zoning and actualized, is there a risk to the city for liability for future flooding should we approve development on what we know is already kind of a floodplain and a high risk area? Speaking legal liability risk.
That would be a question for law, but
Yeah. I'm here. I could answer the question. It's Grant Murray.
Oh, great. Yeah, thank you, Grant.
If we followed our ordinary procedure, which is that somebody would be given notice of any construction in accordance with the floodplain regulations, then they would be adopting their own, they would be obligated to discharge any risks to themselves. We wouldn't have any liability because they would have been specifically warned that there's a problem. That may not be something you're comfortable with, but that certainly would be the law. They construct, it's their problem, not our problem. If I could just weigh in on a couple of things that I've heard so far that have concerned me a little bit. This is not an exclusion application. They have not applied to exclude this from the ALR. This will remain in the ALR after any decision is made today. This is also not a rezoning application. They have not sought any rezoning in any manner whatsoever. The reason that this is before council is that we're obligated to bring it to council. We have no choice but to bring it to council. It was an application brought to the ALC. We have to dispose of it. In fact, our obligation was to dispose of it within 60 days of it being done, and we didn't meet that time, but this is the earliest that we could possibly do it. I think those are all important considerations for this. It's not to exclude it. It's not to rezone it. We have to do it. If this had been done prior to the general order being lifted, which is one of the reasons that we're now facing this, this would have just been simply dismissed by the the approving officer saying this doesn't meet the zoning, you cannot subdivide this. And it would have been as simple as that. Now it requires council to weigh in on it if it's going to be sent to the ALC. Our recommendation is not to send it to the ALC, in large part because it doesn't meet our zoning.
Well, thanks, Mr. Murray. I appreciate you providing that input. I'm glad you're here to do so. Thank you. I'm out of time.
Councillor Dominato, up to 5.
Thanks, Mayor. Sorry. Just a couple of follow-up questions. At the beginning of the presentation, staff referenced that if this were to go to the ALC, that the ALC would take into consideration local government comments. How would those be received? What would that look like? Is that through deliberations here, their minute?
Kind of the same we did before. We think this is a very good conversation to have during the public hearing.
So a lot of work went into this, and we're not talking about an insignificant deviance.
Councillor Hardwick, we are on a very narrow topic right here, so not on, going back and,
But in this particular instance, that's the difference between 6 and 9 stories, which is not insignificant. And
Sure.
It begs the question, why are we coming in with referrals to public hearing on projects that are substantially deviating from significant community efforts? It just it has to be asked, this question, because
and
it
you have
is
asked it.
undermining the trust in the community.
Look, the other thing, Councillor Hardwick, is we have significant, quasi-judicial responsibilities under the public hearing law of the province, and that's why I think you're getting a consistent answer from staff, is that because we pass a policy, it doesn't mean we're bound to follow it. We're not breaking any law if we don't. So that's why we kind of have to hash it out at a public hearing.
Well, maybe not a law, but the public trust.
Well, that's right, and that's exactly why it should be at a public hearing, because we'll suffer politically either way, and I think that's really what this thing is for. So that's my 2 cents. Any other questions on slightly narrower on this one?
Well, again, I can cite the exact examples. This is not compliant with the policies, and it is undermining public trust by continuing to do these things.
Okay. More of a statement there, and once the motion's moved, of course, there's lots of room for debate on this. So I'll go to Councillor Dejanova.
Oh, thanks, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to move the motion, if possible, for referral with the staff recommendations.
Okay. Okay, do we have a seconder for that?
Second.
Okay, thanks. So we're in the main queue now. If you'd like to speak to this referral, please.
I would, but can I ask a point of information? It may feel like deja vu, Mr.
Sure,
Mayor.
yeah, please
But
do.
on page 2 of the report, to the 11 council authority previous decisions, including the Grandview Woodland Plan, City of Vancouver Reconciliation Framework, Housing Vancouver Strategy, High Density Housing for Families with Children Guidelines, Green Buildings Policy for Rezonings, Urban Forest Strategies, I'm almost done, Community Amenity Contributions, Public Art Policy and Procedures for Rezone Developments, Tenant Relocation Protection Policy, Vancouver Development Cost Levy Bylaw, and last but not least, the Vancouver Utilities Development Cost Bylaw. Do they all comply with policy? If I could ask that through you, Mr. Mayor, to staff, that's my only question.
Okay, if we can, staff could answer that point of information.
Certainly be happy to. Yes, those are the policies under which we analyze the application, and I believe you will. I'm skating on thin ice here because Jeff doesn't want me to get into the debate, but
yes.
This staff report does contain a section that specifically addresses height and the form of development, and I believe the answers that you seek will be in that in the report, which is published on the council's website, and the public does have access to it.
Thank you. I was just asking if it complied with those policies. Has there been a question if it complied with policy at all? So it's nice to see 11 listed, and for that reason, I'm comfortable supporting it to referral, noting that I am not fettered in any way by doing so on making a decision after hearing from the public and receiving correspondence the way we are supposed to for a public hearing. So for that reason, I'll be supporting it. Sorry, Mr. Mayor, maybe the same speech as the last one.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Hardwick. You have up to 5 minutes.
Yes, I'm so pleased to hear that Councillor Dejanova is drawing upon the former council's legacy of
Now, Councillor Hardwick, let's keep it on.
Excuse me. The point here is that that this is not, and I have gone through in detail, and this is not compliant. And it does beg the question, why have plans if we're not going to adhere to them? So quite ironic to hear those plans being cited as giving justification. But this is one of the concerning things about using these plans as precedent, especially when they're based on erroneous underlying assumptions. So it seems that minds are made up, but there is no question that this and other projects are moving forward that are not compliant, and it doesn't seem to matter.
Okay, thanks so much. Councillor Dejanova, I have you on the queue.
I just have to say, Mr. Mayor, my mind is not made up, and I want to make that very clear because that I understand could put us in legal jeopardy. And I just stated that in my closing argument. I do come to this with an open mind, but I also understand to even get to hear the public, to have open and transparent legal consultation instead of a bunch of memos that the public doesn't receive and only I receive. I need to move this forward. So I wanted to state for the record that I am keeping an open mind. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Fry, up to 5 minutes.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. And I'm hoping this is still an opportunity for us to ask questions of staff.
Yep, you can ask points of information here.
Yeah, fantastic. So through you then, I'm just, you know, I reflecting on some of Councillor Hardwick's concerns about the dovetailing with the community plan. And as I read it, I do recognize that that particular area is isolated from the Grandview section and that it is already a significant amount of social housing. And I note that it, in that sub area, it talks about heights up to 6 stories for secured market rental. And I note that this particular project is a social housing project, obviously addresses some critical needs for urban indigenous populations that are elsewhere referenced in the plan. And so when in the report summary where staff have assessed the application and concluded generally meets the intent of the community plan with respect to the delivery of social housing, I'm wondering if you could just articulate a little bit further what that means in the context of when we're comparing it to up to 6 stories for secured market rental versus indigenous focused social housing.
I am going to, of course, turn this over to staff, but I think again we're in a kind of a dangerous legal ground here, and I'm sure the lawyers are kind of pulling their hair out because this kind of debate should be again at the public hearing. But I will turn it over to staff in case they can carefully add anything to help Councillor Fry with this.
Thanks, Mayor Stewart. I would agree. I think we are kind of at the boundaries here. Maybe if Mr. Greenberg has any additional advice that he's able to provide at this point.
Yes, it's Jeff Greenberg again. Councillor Fry, I really think that the question that you're getting at is going to the details and merits of the application and is much more appropriately addressed at the public hearing by planning staff answering that question at that time. And then the entire public can hear the answer to the question that you have. And then everyone is on an equal ground at the public hearing to know what information is being considered or not being considered in the deliberations. At the moment, the public is not here and is not hearing this debate or discussion, and is not therefore not privy to the questions and the answers that you're getting.
Okay, I appreciate that and withdraw the question, and I'm satisfied with staff's assessment in referring this report.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Fry. That's it for questions or for comments. So I'm going to move us to a queue for the vote. And that is passed with Councillor Hardwick in opposition. Okay, Council. So let's see what's next. Oh, bylaws. Awesome. So we have 23 bylaws on the agenda with about an hour and 15 minutes left. Council members who are not present for the meeting related to public hearing enactment bylaws must confirm they have reviewed the proceedings of the meetings if they wish to vote on the enactment. And I'm going to go through a list now of folks that were absent for whatever reason. Bylaw 6 is from the public hearing of November 5th. Councillor Carr and Hardwick were absent for the public hearing. Councillor Carr, have you reviewed the proceedings you missed, and will you be voting on the enactment?
I have not, will not.
Okay, thanks. Councillor Hardwick.
Have not, will not.
Okay, thank you. Bylaw 9 is from the public hearing of November 5th. Councillors Carr and Hardwick are absent from the public hearing. Councillor Carr, have you reviewed the proceedings, and will you be voting?
Have not, will not.
Councillor Hardwick.
Have not, will not.
Okay, bylaw 10 is from the public hearing of April 4th. Councillor Hardwick was absent. Councillor Hardwick, have you reviewed the proceedings and will you be voting?
Have not, will not.
Thanks. Bylaw 11 is from the public hearing of November 5th. Councillors Carr and Hardwick were absent from the public hearing. Councillor Carr, have you reviewed the proceedings? Will you be voting?
No, I have not, will not.
Councillor Hardwick.
Have not, will not.
Bylaw 12 is from the public hearing of January 23rd. Councillors Carr, Dejanova, and myself were absent. Councillor Carr, have you reviewed and will you be voting?
Have not, will not.
Councillor Dejanova?
I have and I will, Mr. Mayor.
I have and I will as well. Bylaw 19 is from the public hearing of January 15th and 17th. Councillor Dominato, have you reviewed the proceedings? Will you be voting?
I have not and will not.
Thanks. Any member wish to hold any of the bylaws for debate, separate vote, or for conflict of interest?
Yes, once in here, I'd like to hold 6 and 12.
Okay, hold 6 and 12. Sorry, I'm just taking a note here. Thanks so much. So let's see now. Clerks, what we're going to do, we're going to, these are for debate, Councillor Swanson, or for questions to staff, or?
I just want to make my vote consistent. I won't yak about them.
Okay, great. So thanks for that. So clerks, if you just help me through this one. Councillor Swanson wants to have a separate vote on bylaws 6 and 12. Should we do those first?
Yes, Mayor, that would be fine.
Okay, great. So I don't see anybody else on the queue. I've made it all the way through. So we're going to have a, we're going to have to have a recorded vote on bylaw 6. So I'll get clerks to do the queue.
Point of privilege.
Yes, you may have been absent or not voting. So
that's right. So will you record me that way?
Yes, that's right. So just to remind folks, bylaw 6 is Councillor Carr and Hardwick are, I guess they would be absent. What's that? I don't quite know any. I don't know how you're going to mark that, clerks, but clerks are just marking that now. Right. Okay. So that bylaw passes with Councillor Swanson in opposition. And we're going to go do the same thing with bylaw 12. I'm just looking through the list here. Bylaw 12. Councillor Carr will have to mark you as absent, or Councillor Dejanova and myself have reviewed the information. So I'll call the vote now.
So, Mary Stewart, we don't have somebody moving and seconding the bylaws yet. So
I'm sorry.
We'll have to do the vote again.
Okay, sorry about
I'd be happy to move that or second it.
Okay, thanks. Councillor Dejanova, Councillor Fry, we'll have to vote again. Not the same mark. Okay, if everybody could just vote again. Thanks. Councillor Swanson in opposition. And we just pull the vote up on screen. I'm just going to pause for a sec for clerks to kind of get sorted, and then we'll move to the next bylaw 12.
Mover and a seconder, please.
Yes, can I have a mover and a seconder? Thank you.
Fry.
Thank you. Same as last time. Thanks for that. And now we can vote. Councillor Carr was absent for that one. There we go. Okay, so that has passed with Councillor Swanson and Hardwick in opposition. Now we're going to do a blanket vote on all the remaining. So would someone like to move the adoption of bylaws? Okay, I heard Councillor Dejanova, with the exception of bylaws 6 and 12.
Sorry, Mr. Mayor, will my vote, I'm sorry, point of privilege.
Yes.
I've never been absent before, so I don't know how to do this. Sorry.
Yeah, what'll happen is the clerk, because why we do the script beforehand is a point of procedure. Why we do the script beforehand is for you to indicate which ones you will not be voting on, and in the blanket vote, the clerks will record it as you being absent.
For those specific ones.
That's right. Yeah. So that's what we do. Yeah. No problem at all. So I had a Councillor Dejanova moved it. Do we have a seconder?
Second, Councillor Blythe.
Okay. All in favor say yay.
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 Opposed say nay. Great, so that motion passes unanimously, and the list of approved bylaws can be found on the city's website. Okay, we're cruising at coming close to 9. There's one administrative motion on the agenda. Approval of form of development 5027 Boundary Road. Anybody wish to declare a conflict of interest on this one? Someone like to move the motion?
Kirby Young.
Thank you. Seconder?
Councillor Bly.
Second, Councillor.
I heard Councillor Bly. Okay. Any discussion? I see Councillor Kirby Young. I'm going to move us over to the main queue.
No, that's actually for the next item. Sorry.
Oh, okay. Right. So no discussion. So all those in favor say yay.
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 Opposed say nay. Great. Okay, that's passed. Thank you. So now we're on to council members' motions. We have 3 members' motions on the agendas today. Council members have 2 minutes to introduce their motion and 1 minute each to ask clarifying questions of the mover. Motion 1 is an easy one. Request for leaves of absence. Councillor Weave for civic business for the meetings on January 20th, February 10th, March 10th, and June 16th, all from 9:30 to 1:30 p.m.
So moved, Councillor
We're not
DeGenova.
quite done yet. Councillor Dejanova for
sorry.
civic business. Meetings on July 7th and October 6th and on November 3rd, all from 12:30 to 5:30. So Councillor Dejanova moving it. Seconder?
Second, Councillor Carr.
Thanks very much. All those in favor say yay.
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 Opposed say nay. Okay, great. That passes. Okay, motion 2 is turning the key, encouraging affordable home ownership in the city of Vancouver, moved by Councillor Dejanova. And Councillor Dejanova, you have up to 2 minutes.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. I was just thinking back to 7 years ago or 6 years ago when I first put the motion forward for affordable home ownership. And here we are today, and appreciate that there's a number of different initiatives for affordable home ownership in our city. Bear with me, Council. I'm going to try and start my video here and hope that I will not lose connection with you. I just in introducing the motion, I wanted to note that after speaking with staff and speaking with the city manager, that I will be intending to, I know that there is a speaker to this, so intending to refer this forward, but also to modify the timeline to Q4, and that staff would come back, maybe not with recommendations, but at least a report back and update. The point of this is very clear, and it's about utilizing BC Housing's Housing Hub program, which I understand that, you know, an MOU with them would help the city of Vancouver, instead of allowing applicants specifically to choose the locations of where these homes would go, it would also give our staff greater oversight. Also looking at CMHC's programs to make sure we leave nothing on the table. And I think that there's a way for some synergies here between this motion, the motion that you've moved forward, Mr. Mayor, as well as the motion that Councillor Dominato had moved forward quite recently also about different types of affordable home ownership. This specifically looks at some partnerships that would move it forward. With BC Housing, we have 2 units in the city of Vancouver of affordable home ownership right now. That's two townhomes. Coquitlam has many more. They have an MOU, and I also just wanted to state that affordable home ownership, in fact, does help people of lower incomes in the rental market, as people who could not afford a down payment are able to apply to BC Housing for the second mortgage. And the thought is, and we have some research at the City of Vancouver to show that this, in fact, would create some vacancy in the rental market. I'm sorry, Mr. Mayor, I can't see my timer right now, so I'll leave it there.
Yep.
Thanks.
Thanks very much. Any questions for Councillor Dejanova? I don't see any questions, so.
Can I move this to the next committee meeting, if that's possible? Oh, I see someone else on the queue.
No, that's right. Yep. So would somebody like to, we need somebody to second the motion first.
Sorry, Kenny, I just have a question.
Oh, you do? Okay. Up to 1 minute then.
Sorry.
Yeah, my question is to the mover, recognizing how important this topic's been and that it's taken 7 years. Why do you think it's taken so long to really get momentum in Vancouver, recognizing that affordable home ownership is something that I've heard a lot of people talk about.
Well, I have 50 seconds left, but when I first started this in the Minister of Housing's office several years ago, BC Housing was very interested. They took my briefing notes and we worked together collaboratively, and they had already been working on this. They have some excellent information, and they also, the issue with Vancouver specifically is we needed a charter change, whereas the community charter would have allowed this. BC Housing's made this so much easier because we don't have to choose the individuals. BC Housing will vet them and offer them a second mortgage, which essentially is their down payment. So I'm hoping that we could utilize through MOU the ability for our staff to be able to kind of choose what projects that went to. Happy to talk to you more, Councillor Weeb, at the next meeting. I don't have very much time, but interim rezoning policy was passed in Vancouver to allow it. It never did come to fruition. Thanks.
Thanks so much. Well, that's the minute. So I don't see any of the councillors with questions. So we need a seconder. We have a seconder.
Second, Councillor Kirby.
I think I heard Councillor Dominato there first to the second. So we have received requests to speak to this motion. If council would like to hear the speakers, we can refer the motion to the standing committee on Wednesday, February 10th, starting at 9:30. Someone would like to move it?
So moved. Councillor DiGenova.
The seconder?
Councillor Bly.
Councillor Bly. All those in favor say yay.
Yay. Yay. Yay.
Opposed say nay. Great. So that motion is referred to the standing committee meeting on March 10th. Motion 3 is a community safety and well-being framework. And I'd like to note that due to a staff error, the title of the motion was incorrect when first posted. This motion is going to be now moved by Councillor Weeb. Councillor Weeb, you have up to 2 minutes. I can put you on the queue here.
Yeah, obviously there was a little bit of confusion, and I will be pulling the motion tonight, and I will be resubmitting a new notice of motion to recognize a couple of the components that need to be dealt with within the motion. I think that I'm sorry to people that have been involved and councillors that I gave a certain statement, and then instead this actually in one way actually made the polarization between the two sides, including community services, worse. And I think that that's a discussion, and I think this is a very important topic that's affecting so many people in Vancouver. I think it needs to be dealt with appropriately.
Okay.
I'm going to take the next 2 weeks, so I will be pulling the motion tonight.
Okay, we don't need any further action. You're just you're entitled to withdraw this, Councillor Weeb, so we don't need a vote on this. Great. So thanks for that. And now we're moving on to the next item, which is the notice of motion for council members. Go ahead, Councillor Weeb, I have you on the queue that you want to.
Yes, I am going to submit a motion called Community Safety and Wellbeing.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Swanson.
I have one called Protecting Tenants from Real Estate Investment Trusts and Other Types of Investors.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Bly.
I have one motion aligning the cannabis license fee structure to support Vancouver businesses.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Kirby-Young.
Yes, I have one entitled Daylighting Building Permit Wait Times.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Fry.
Yeah, I have two. UBCM resolution updating BC's wrongful death law. And number 2 is local elections review and reform.
Thank you. If Councillor Kirby-Young could take the chair.
Yeah, go ahead.
Thanks. I have one motion called Understanding COVID-19 Economic Recovery Through Housing Construction. If I can take the chair back.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor DeGenova.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. I have one that I had called notice on last time that I'd held back, and it's childcare that works, extended hour and around the clock childcare for working families in Vancouver.
Okay, thank you. And Councillor Dominato.
Mayor, I'm on the queue for new business.
Okay, thanks very much. So I'm going to close. The the members motion portion. Just a reminder that we need these submitted to the titles submitted to the clerk. Okay, so we're on new business.
Mr. Mayor, just a point of privilege. The
Yes.
council meeting amendments group was what I understood we were supposed to send these to. Is that not the case?
As long as it makes it to the clerk in one form or another, we're good. So whichever one you
Okay.
want to send it in. Okay, thanks. New business inquiries and other matters. I have Councillor Dominato. Please go ahead.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor and Council. And so I've circulated an urgent motion to Mayor and Council to consider this evening, and it's specifically with respect to the PNE and its efforts to get COVID funding relief. So you hopefully have that in your inbox, but it is, I know that, well,
Second, Councillor DiGenova.
Thank you. Can I speak to it right now, Mayor?
Yes, we need, right, so you're putting a, first of all, have you sent it into the clerks?
Yeah. Oh, sorry. The answer to council, not the clerk, so I will do that right now.
Okay, thanks. And so under this new business, you are putting forward a motion and it's been seconded. So now we're on the main queue. Yes, and so since you've moved it, you can speak to it, Councillor Dominato. Please go ahead. Up to 5 minutes.
Thanks, Mayor. I think I don't need to elaborate on the role the PNE plays in our city in terms of being a critical employer, but also an enormous contribution to arts and culture within our city. But it has been incredibly hit by the pandemic. We've been in active discussions, both at the political level as well as the public service level, with the federal government to get financial relief through the federal subsidy program. Unfortunately, I have not been able to gain success or traction there. We've also been in discussions with the province, but there was, of course, the provincial election. And so we subsequently, and I believe the mayor did, that I know through the PNE, the CEO been in touch with ministers provincially around seeking funding relief as well. The urgency now is that, we haven't been able to find any funding through the province. We haven't been able to obtain funding to the province, and they are bringing forward a budget in the next 3 to 4 weeks, as well as a throne speech. And so on behalf of the PNE, would like council support in empowering you, Mayor, to further advocate on the PNE's behalf and in whatever puts that in terms of writing the Prime Minister, in terms of writing the Premier, and any other informal discussions you may be able to undertake to get some relief, because the pandemic, we're certainly not out of the woods now. And so I think we need to consider the viability of the organization, and any support would be welcome. And they have to be clear, shut out from any subsidy support, unlike other fairs and organizations across the country who have received support.
Okay, thanks very much. Councillor DeGenova, I have you on the list.
Okay.
Oh, we've already seconded. It
okay,
is seconded.
Yeah.
You seconded.
I think I did. Yeah, thank you.
Did you want to say anything on this?
I just wanted to ask a point of information through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Dominato.
Okay.
And that is, I understand that she had stated that she had hoped that there would be requests to the federal government for funding, the provincial government for funding. But sometimes I find that there's also a loophole that the federal government has given the provincial government a certain amount of money to disperse. You know what I'm talking about, Mr. Mayor. Disperse to different municipalities that isn't considered federal funding or provincial funding. And perhaps, Mr. Mayor, you would know exactly what that fund is called. It often changes. And I happen to know this just through my work in non-market housing. And my past experience working for nonprofits. I just wondered, Councillor Dominato, was it your intention also that we seek all avenues of funding, including that type of funding, to make sure that although the PNE, the Pacific National Exhibition, does not tick all of the boxes that apply to the specific programs of funding that have come forward for COVID-19, that there's some flexibility here, and if at all that funding could be secured through funding that the federal government has given to the province, that be something that the City of Vancouver does indeed try to secure.
Yes, certainly that would be, to your question, Councillor DeGenova, to pursue all avenues possible. I think the P&E has demonstrated they've been very creative and resilient throughout. They've been able to undertake a number of drive-through events, including the Winter Lights, which was probably one of the few kind of winter Christmas events are able to go on this year. And but despite that, there are still significant shortfalls, and they've had to lay off probably the vast majority of their workforce, with the exception of a very small number of people. And so yes, I would like us to exhaust all avenues, and as well as if there's any opportunity to get matching funds from the province if we have to put something in, but open to all suggestions and around that.
Thanks so much, Councillor Dominato. I wholeheartedly support this, and I just wanted to state that, and I thank you for bringing this forward. I think that it is urgent. It shouldn't wait another 2 weeks, and if the mayor is willing to pen another letter, I wholeheartedly support this. I think that the workforce in Vancouver is something that we have seen significantly impacted in a way that we have never seen before. The pandemic has had impacts that have rippled across just our city. I've heard stories of people who were on work visas who actually had employment with specific places. This isn't specifically about the P&E, but I think it is important to note. And their visas say that they can only work in a certain place. They've been devastated by the facts that their companies have shut down, that they no longer have work, that they've been laid off. That being said, with borders closed and certain, we can focus on economic recovery, but I think at the same time, there are some people that are just trying to get by. And that being said, I think that we have to do what we can to protect our assets. And I do see both the P&E and Hastings Park as assets in our city. Thank you.
Thanks. I have myself on the list. I was just wondering if Councillor Kirby-Young, you could take over chair while I...
Yes, please go ahead.
Thanks very much. Just joining in the debate. Yeah, thank you very much, Councillor Dominato, for bringing this forward. I know you're closer to this, the P&E than most of us because of your work there. I'm just wondering if you could just give us a sense of how bad is the financial situation there, to your knowledge. That's a point of information through the chair, if that's possible.
Yeah, we're in like tens of millions of dollars we're talking about, and I think that as I reflected earlier, is that they've been operating incredibly lean, and they've done furloughs, they've laid off management, they've obviously had seasonal workers as well, but we're down to a bare minimum. And while there's been some revenue made up through some of these smaller events I've mentioned, it doesn't meet our needs. And the opportunity through the federal subsidy program was, I think up to this date, it would have been to the tune of $3 million that the P&E could have received like other fairs and events. And by June of this year would be up to $6 million.
And just if I can follow up with that, to my understanding, the P&E is the only fair in Canada that's being denied these access to this federal program. Is that your understanding?
Yes, that's correct. That's my understanding. Is that when you look at the CNE, the Stampede, Rodeo, that they've all been able to access a federal wage subsidy, and the P&E, just because of its being part of the municipal ownership structure, is not able to access the subsidy.
And this might be a tough thing to do, but I'm just wondering, how dire is the situation there? I mean, I think, I just, my wife, Jeanette, all her first jobs were at the P&E. It's such a source of employment, and I know we can't do that right now with physical distancing, but if it goes away, then future generations won't be able to enjoy this, as well as a great gathering place for folks. Everybody, I love the P&E. So can you give us an assessment of the kind of future prospects for the P&E if there isn't some help coming soon?
Yeah, certainly. Sorry, I'm getting a bit of an echo, but I think, as I mentioned, there's been significant loss. They canceled $52 million in events, so that's event revenue. And when I mentioned the layoffs, 93% of the P&E's full-time union team has been laid off, and 50% of its management team have been laid off. And this is an iconic organization that I think people just think about the fair, but they deliver year-round activities and events in terms of managing Hastings Park. So there's lots of community events like skating and other events throughout the year, but also a key part of our tourism sector and our arts and culture sector in terms of concerts. So there's a significant risk to the organization from my perspective, and that's where I think the financial relief comes in through our other higher levels of government.
Okay, thanks so much. I will, if this passes by council, I'll do everything I can and would call on council to help us. I think we probably need to, I have been working through federal MPs, as I know others have, to secure this funding, but I think we probably need to take it up a notch to be much more vocal. And if this passes, I'll do my absolute best to make it painful not to help us here. So thank you again, Councillor Dominato, and that's it for me. Can I have the chair?
All your questions and comments, Mr. Mayor?
Yes, it is.
Great. Well, back to you. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Councillor Carr, up to you. 5 minutes.
Oh, sorry, is this on a new matter or did you? I'm not.
No, this is the PNE.
Oh, still the PNE. Yeah, just I did want to express real gratitude to Councillor Dominato for bringing this forward. I think I've attended the PNE from the time I lived in East Van as a little toddler and took my kids through every year. It's iconic within the city. So thank you for bringing it forward. I fully support this.
Okay, thanks. I don't see anybody else. Oh, I have Councillor Weeb on the queue. Councillor Weeb.
Yeah, quick question to the mover. The PNE had a lot of capital projects on the planning horizon. I'm just wondering how COVID has put those into hold, recognizing there's a lot of greening and a lot of community amenities that were coming forth. I'm just wondering how this is going to relate to that work, or do you think this can help them rebuild and start moving towards that new greener fair? Okay,
sorry, Councillor Dominato, you're on mute. and I have a cracker in my mouth.
Sorry. Just to your point around just the capital investments, I don't think those are completely derailed right now. Certainly, there's a limited number of staff, so things are a bit of a holding pattern, but there is still a focus on the master plan. And also, I think we are in a position to move forward with the amphitheater renewal. And I know that's something that council has endorsed. And there was, I think, as you know, a sort of RFP process around that. So that's something that I think is actually a shining light on the horizon, is that we'll have an amphitheater that we'll be able to use more broadly going forward, that year round, because right now it's not the best year round site. There's no cover and so on. But I know there's other areas of interest like the daylight and stream and so on. And so I think we'll be in a better position to reflect on those later in the year. But certainly none of it's off the table. It's just that I think, like many organizations, they're just trying to keep going and stay viable at this point.
Thank you.
Mayor Stewart, I think you're muted.
I think that's double digits now. So I don't see anybody else on the queue. So we could take a vote on this. Councillor Weeb, I just need a. Here we go. So that is passed unanimously. Thank you very much, Council. I am going back to Councillor Swanson next.
Yeah, I just wanted to take a couple of minutes here to give a shout out to.
Point of privilege, Mr. Mayor.
Yes, Councillor Kirby-Young.
I was on the queue after Councillor Dominato for new business.
Oh, you know what? I've gone to the wrong queue. Sorry about that. Right, so Councillor Dominato, you're finished?
Yes, sorry about that.
Okay,
yeah.
sorry about that. Councillor Kirby-Young, you were next. Please go ahead, and we'll come back to you, Councillor Swanson, next.
Yeah, thank you very much. I have two items of new business that I wanted to raise, and the first was to extend thank you and acknowledgement to Councillor Boyle for extending the opportunity for council to collectively participate in an op-ed, which ran this past weekend. Feels like a long time ago now. but in the province. And it was, I thought, a very appropriate strategy to show council's advocacy for the retaining the $300 increase in the disability social assistance rates. But it also represented, I think, council using the power of its collective voice on a key issue facing our city. And we really see the downstream impacts when people do not have adequate housing and are homeless. I just thought that that was worth noting, and I just really want to extend my acknowledgement to Councillor Boyle for extending that opportunity for all of council. So that was the first item. So thank you very much for that. The second item of new business that I wanted to raise is that a week from today, next Wednesday, is actually International Holocaust Remembrance Day. As I'm sure many know, that in 2005, the United Nations General Assembly designated January 27th, which was the anniversary of the liberation of the largest Nazi concentration and death camp at Auschwitz-Birkenau, where over 6 million innocent lives were lost. And this is a day, obviously, that has had incredible bearing in our history. This day is now International Holocaust Remembrance Day, which is upcoming. As I said, next Wednesday, January 27th, is observed by many UN countries, including Canada, Italy, Germany, and cities here in Canada, including Calgary, Ottawa, and Montreal. I'm very glad that Vancouver is joining them and has now added International Holocaust Remembrance Day to our official list of city observances. And I know the city has issued a proclamation to them. And also wanted to let council know that City Hall will be lighting up yellow in support, as will BC Place next Wednesday. And I think more than ever, we see an increasing rise in hate crime, and that against a number of our different communities, but we see that continually in terms of anti-Semitism, and I've seen very recent instances of that with bombing of Zoom worships and a number of, signage and hateful messaging that has been graffitied in the city. And so I think as we reflect on the dark period in history, remember that the atrocities were perpetrated during the Holocaust. I'm very grateful that council has fully supported the opportunity for us to join with our Jewish community and demonstrate our support. And so I wanted to note that day is coming up for council and make sure that we all have the opportunity to recognize it. And I'm very glad that Vancouver is joining the other cities, and that we're taking these steps, and we'll see those buildings lit up in Vancouver in support.
Thank you. Councillor Swanson.
Yeah, I wanted to give a shout out to the Militant Mothers of Raymer. January is the 50th anniversary of their action blockading the railroad tracks that their kids had to cross every day to get to school. And so I thought I'd read a few paragraphs from Carolyn Jerome's article in the Georgia Straight about their battle. She was one of the militant mothers. We were two single moms in 1970-71, living in the project's high rise at 400 Campbell, and we would each see each other in the elevator. We would talk about the control that BC Housing Commission exerted on its tenants, especially its policy of no guests allowed after certain hours, complete with eyes peering from the Housing Commission office located by the elevator. That got us laughing. Those elevator conversations inevitably turned to challenging the audacity of the nearby railroad tracks. They were running their trains to and from the docks at the same time that our kids had to cross their tracks to get to school. We started phoning the railway and phoning Vancouver City Hall, but our calls went unanswered. When we complained to the housing authority at Raymer, they just shrugged their shoulders and said, "Not our jurisdiction, blah, blah, blah." Our casual neighborly chats evolved into a group of us meeting over tea in one another's apartments, featuring tea sessions. We emerged as mothers determined to have this dangerous situation addressed. It was a cold morning on January 8th, 1971, when we first stood on the Burrard Inlet railway tracks in front of an oncoming train. Feeling the thunder of that train's reverberations beneath our feet was terrifying. Would it stop in time or drive right into us? Was this the right move to stand in front of a moving train? We hung on to each other, quivering, not so much from the cold, but from the uncertainty. We all breathed a sigh of relief as it finally braked to halt in front of us. So to make a long story short, they persevered, gaining lots of community support, and they got their overpass. Community mobilizing works. And I hope our city can remember this story. And thanks so much to Carolyn for writing it. There's a great picture of them in the straight. Lisa Aptha, who was a teenager at the time of the protest, and the militant mothers, Barbara Burnett, Joan Morelli, Carolyn Jerome, and Mug Sigurgierson. That's it.
Thanks, Councillor Swanson. Councillor Carr.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. I didn't know if it was in the form of a motion that I should forward this to you, but I feel very strongly about it. It could have been informally, I guess, under other matters. But I think, like many of us, we've been following what has been happening in the United States for the last 4 years, and the recent election and the subsequent actions within the United States, and finally today's inauguration of Joe Biden as the 46th president of the United States. And I thought that it would be good of our city, you on behalf of our city, to write a letter to the US President Biden, congratulating him on becoming the 46th president of the United States and expressing hope and gratitude for his inaugural remarks, which I think many of us did listen to, calling for a new era of civility, compassion, and bold action on the climate, social justice, and health emergencies we're all facing. I don't remember this happening before in my time on council, but I just think that we're at such a pivotal point in the history, really, of our world, and I think it would be just such a, I think, supportive and compassionate move on our part to send a letter of support. If you listen to his speech this morning, it really was very moving, and has turned around my feeling of quite desperation in the situation in the United States to one of hope, because they are not just a country unto themselves, but really a force within the world. So it's a simple motion. I sent in a title just now at the request of the city clerk, just being a letter congratulating U.S. President Biden, and the general gist of the content is contained as I read out in my motion.
Thank you. Do we have a seconder for this?
Second.
Thank you. Okay, I'll put us on a main queue. If anybody would like to speak to this, please go ahead. I don't have any. Oh, Councillor Harvick, please go ahead.
Woohoo!
That's pretty good. I think that sums it up for all of us. Anybody else? Okay, so we can call a vote on this one. Councillor Dejanova, do you need a vote assist? I don't see Councillor Dejanova on the. I know Councillor Bly had to leave. I think I'm going to mark Councillor Dejanova absent and just move on here. Thanks very much. Anything else, Councillor Carr?
That's it, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Councillor Hardwick.
Thank you. Mine is an inquiry.
Okay.
I was just looking back, and it was January 29th, 2019, so 2 years ago, that I asked in council a question on a housing file about the nature of the Housing Vancouver targets of a goal of 72,000 new homes over the decade. I asked that again on February 26, 2019. And in May, I brought forward a motion called Recalibrating the Housing Vancouver Strategy Post-COVID-19. I brought forward the motion. I actually introduced the motion, much as we just did here now on May 12th, 2020. Subsequent to that, I had a Zoom call the next day on May 21st with Gil Kelly, the Director of Planning, and Dan Garrison in Housing Policy and Regulation, together with several of my academic urban geography colleagues, Dr. David Lay, Dr. John Rose, and Andy Yan. Over that 90-minute call, we talked at length about the missing data that we really needed to be able to understand the rationale behind the Housing Vancouver targets and to get a better understanding of where we need to be going with housing. And we had a very fruitful call. We had an agenda advance. I had, and I took copious notes. I subsequently revised the motion, putting in bullet points the data sets that myself and my academic colleagues had requested. Subsequent to that, I ran my amended motion by the Director of Planning, who concurred and told me that I had captured the detail of our meeting together. I brought that motion to council, and we had an active debate about it, and it did pass unanimously with the direction to staff to provide a memo by the end of July with data attached. It had been suggested that a report would take too much time and involve a bunch of analysis, but by providing only a memo with the data attached, which was of interest to, again, my academic colleagues, that would suffice and could be quite easily presented. This is not the first time that I've brought this forward, because at the end of July, we got what was really a report with findings and not what had been understood, which was that we were to receive data. And by data, I mean in machine readable forms, Excel, shape files for GIS files. This was the nature of the conversation. So we went back and responded to the memo and went point by point through analyzing where the data had not been provided and suggesting that to create the graphs and charts, there had to be data behind it to please provide. I came forward under inquiries in September 15th and asked this. And at the time, Mr. Mayor, you agreed to help move this forward. You and I had a conversation subsequently at the end of October. So my point is, here I am 2 years later in January, after asking for an explanation and having a unanimously approved motion that directed staff to provide a memo with data. So my inquiry is, when are we going to see the data? Because if staff is not providing what it was directed to do, then we have a problem, and I hate to continue bringing this up. But until that's provided, the terms of the motion, which was approved by council, have not been met.
Okay, thank you. I know that Mr. Mokry's here now. Did you want to respond to this, Mr. Mokry, at this time? Or?
Yeah, yep. Certainly. Okay. And Councillor Hardwick and I have spoken about this. So yeah, I first acknowledge the request that's been made and the direction that's been issued by council. So I don't think there's any lack of clarity around that. I, at this point in time, am not entirely clear on what data we have, but it's clear to me that whatever data we have, we should be providing. So that's the conversation that I've had with the Director of Planning, and we'll continue to follow up. I'm not able to provide kind of a timeline for you this evening on that, but understand that this has been outstanding for a long time, and I'm certainly keen to close this off and to provide. And I appreciate, again, just to be clear, that it's source data that you're looking for, Councillor, and that was the subject of the motion. You know, that's my objective and commitment at this point in time, is to provide you the data that we have on hand. If there's gaps in that, then to have a further conversation with council about where those gaps are and why they exist and so on. So again, I can't speak to why this has taken so long, but I certainly acknowledge that. I don't think there's any question. And my objective and commitment is to get you that information as quickly as I can.
Thank you, Mr. Mokri. I am persevering on this because this was discussed in great specificity. And it was agreed upon and represented that it was available. And I can only ask the question, why has it not been provided when we've gone to this extent? And it was specifically determined that it was available and would be easy to provide.
We're
I'll
at
leave it
the,
at that.
thanks for 5 minutes. Thank you. Councillor Dejanova. Oh, who's not here? Councillor Dominato.
Thanks, Mayor. Just a couple of inquiries and a comment to Councillor Carr. Thank you for your motion around President Biden. I realized after we voted on it that it might have been nice to also recognize our first woman, Vice President Kamala Harris, and first woman of color. But maybe that could be added to the letter subsequently.
Absolutely. That's been noted. No, I can definitely include that. Yeah.
I realized that after we voted. I have one inquiry to our city manager. It's just a follow-up. If we could get an update around the motion that was referred by council to staff around budget reform in election years. So this is last year. And it was referred simply to staff as a reference point, and it was to see whether we could make some changes so that council isn't forced into voting on a budget a month and a half after being elected in a civic election year. If I could just get an update as to whether that's being looked at any further and considered, just given that we'll be going into a civic election in 2022, and the intent behind that motion, while it wasn't passed, it was referred, was to see reforms in that area.
Certainly, thanks, Councillor. I know that staff have been looking at it, and I will follow up with an update on the status.
Okay, that's great. Thank you. And then appreciate that Councillor Kirby-Young's comments around thanking Councillor Boyle for the opportunity to participate in the op-ed. I also want to acknowledge that around the social assistance and disability rates, and then also looking at the calendar as well, so we won't be meeting next week, is that January 28th is the annual Bell Let's Talk Day, which is focused on mental health and mental health awareness in the country. And it's an area that's near and dear to my heart, and that we've recognized as a council in the past. But I think just acknowledging that particularly in this year with the pandemic, it's been very difficult on people in terms of mental health and wellness, and a number of us have talked about that as colleagues, and that's why I was excited about the conversation that Councillor Weep is trying to engage in terms of community wellness and safety as well, because the pandemic has taken a toll, and I think it's a good reminder of the importance of talking and sharing and actually asking people how they're doing, and you know, Dr. Henry's words about moving forward and practicing kindness, because it has been a tough year, and I think people have really felt it at a level around their mental health and wellness, and so just acknowledging that day coming up. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Swanson. You're on mute.
I just realized that I forgot to do a notice of motion. So I've got another notice of motion for February 9th.
Yeah, it's too late though. Sorry. I'm going to move on to Councillor Fry while I think about that one. Councillor Fry.
Yeah, thanks. And thanks to Councillor Swanson for acknowledging the Militant Mothers of Raymer earlier, which also was precipitated in the creation of Raycam Community Center. After the success at blockading the railway and getting the pedestrian overpass, they parlayed that into a community co-op. I have two, which later became Raycam Community Center. I have two inquiries. Number one, inquiring on the status of the tiny homes motion that council approved later last year. There's been increased interest in the tiny homes, and in particular, the municipality of Duncan on Vancouver Island has been pursuing that, and I know there's a number of private stakeholders who are really interested in participating, and there's some media sniffing around as well. So I'm hoping we can get an update around where staff are at on our building bylaw and zoning regulations that might facilitate the implementation of tiny homes, not just in a variety of circumstances, including on private lands. Obviously, I don't expect anything right this moment, but I would hope that we could get an update on that. And the other inquiry is acknowledging Councillor Dominato's earlier comments about mental health. A number of residents in Strathcona, adjacent to the rail crossing at Cordova and Raymer, are finding themselves increasingly desperate for some sort of intervention with the incessant dinging of the crossing when the trains are stopping there waiting to enter the rail yard. And this can be for considerable amounts of time, well over half an hour at a time. And I know that there's some work from staff and they're planning to do some consultation with residents to talk about different options to address that. And I just want to acknowledge the desperation of folks who live in there. And there's a significant population living there in condos and social housing immediately adjacent to those tracks. So I hope we can get an update on that soon as well. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Right, I'm just checking here on the queue. Councillor Kirby-Young.
Yeah, I do have one quick inquiry, and it's a follow-up to one I raised in December, which was about the status of the work that staff are undertaking with respect to aligning Vancouver's liquor capacity with the provincial fire code, and the motion of council. And staff did come back with an updated memo, which I appreciated in December, and advised that some sort of early assessment work was underway, and then they would be engaging with consultation various stakeholders. And I just wanted to register a formal request from the local craft breweries to be included in the list of groups that are being consulted. I know the memo suggested the Hospitality Vancouver Association and a couple of other stakeholders that would be spoken with. And the breweries were specifically asked to be consulted and suggested that one effective avenue to do that would be through the Craft Guild. And I'll pass the contact that I received on to staff, but I wanted to flag their interest formally for the record in participating in that. And again, the spirit, I think, behind that is that the industry is, just like we're all looking forward to the vaccine, I think the industry is looking forward to this as a positive opportunity once we come out the other side of COVID in terms of strengthening economic recovery. So that group would very much like to have a vote. So I just want to raise that.
Thanks. I see you on the list, Councillor Swanson. I have been talking with the clerk, and we could suspend the rules if 2/3 of us agree to allow you to read your title into the record.
Okay, I move that we suspend the rules so I can read my title into the record.
I'll second that.
Thanks. I'll call yeas and nays first. All in favor, yay.
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 Opposed, nay. Okay, so Councillor Swanson, we're suspending the rules. Go ahead and have to send the title into the clerks, but you can read it into the record.
It's a motion for February 9th called Adding a Ceremonial Name of the Komagadama Road to a Portion of Main Street.
Okay, thanks so much.
Thank you.
I don't have anybody else on the list, so I think that's it. I think we're good.
Motion to
Adjourn.
adjourn?
Yes.
Yay.
Thanks. Seconder. Do we have a seconder?
Second,
Thanks,
yes.
Councillor. Okay, thanks. All in favor say yay.
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 Opposed, nay. Okay, thanks,
Staff.
Council. We're
Thanks, everyone.
adjourned. Thank you. We do have a public hearing tomorrow night, so we'll see you back at 6 o'clock if I survive the police board meeting. Okay. Thanks,
Good luck,
everybody.
Mr. Mayor.
Oh,
Council.
thanks.
Good night.
Thanks.
Good night.
Good night.
Yeah.
Good night.